Hey guys, what's going on? James here. In this video today, we are going to be continuing our regrading series of all the Tampa Bay Buccaneers off seasons under general manager Jason Licht. Today is 2016's off season. Now, this was a bit of a mixed bag because you did see some moments where it seemed like, okay, Jason Licht is building a core group of guys to build around and starting to add talent to this roster. But then the 2016 NFL draft happened. But we'll get to that later on in this video. Let's go ahead and start off with the hiring of head coach Dirk Koetter, which I give a C+. Now, this was a bit of a tricky situation where the Bucs fired Lovie Smith after his second season. He went from 2 wins his first year to 6 wins his second year, but the Bucs moved on from Lovie Smith and promoted Dirk Koetter to head coach, a decision that Jason Licht did have a say in. He did not hire Lovie Smith. It is important to remember that as well. The main reason the Bucs did hire Dirk Koetter, or promote Dirk Koetter, I should say, is because they wanted continuity with quarterback Jameis Winston at the time. It did have some mixed results overall, in my opinion. I give it a C+ because, look, in that first year, yeah, they did win 9 games, did have a winning season, considering where they were at that point versus where they had been the previous 2 years. I'm going to give Dirk Koetter some credit for that. Now, things did fall off the rails the next couple of seasons. I think part of that was Dirk Cutter's fault, including, keeping a guy like defensive coordinator Mike Smith around and just some of the inconsistencies at the quarterback position. We'll probably talk about that a little bit later on as well. You also could have made the argument that Lovie Smith deserved a 3rd season. That's kind of an interesting what if, in my opinion. Would they have been just as good with Dirk Koetter as head coach, maybe better with Lovie Smith as head coach? We'll never know that answer, right? But I give it a C+. Koetter was a all right hiring at the time. I remember being very holy crap, I can't believe the Buccaneers just did this whenever the move did happen. And overall, it was an okay move at the time. Re-signings and releases. The Bucs did release Bruce Carter this offseason. It's a D, another move where the Bucs had signed a guy to a long-term deal in Bruce Carter. He had literally just signed a 4-year contract the season before, the offseason before, and then they released him. So I give it a D. Again, kudos to Jason Licht for learning from mistakes, but he did a decent number of times this formula early on where it's like, hey, I'm going to sign a guy to a long-term deal. Didn't work out. I'm going to move on from this guy only after 1 year. Again, Michael Johnson, Anthony Collins, Bruce Carter are some of the bigger examples. But he did kind of do really good work with the re-signings. He brought back Bradley McDougald on a 1-year, $2.55 million deal. B+ for me. I was a big fan of Bradley McDougald around this time. We have the same birthday as well, November 15th. So shout out to Bradley McDougald for that. He was always a solid safety. Jacquez Smith was brought back on a 1-year, $600,000 deal. B. He was a fine rotational pass rusher. Doug Martin was brought back on a 5-year, $35.75 million deal. At the time, I give it a B+, because this is whenever Doug Martin was really cooking. He did fall off pretty much very shortly after this contract extension, but in the moment, contextually, I will give it a B+. He wasn't absolutely terrible after he received this extension as well. He had very hot year, cold year, things along those lines. So I'll give it a B+ because I really don't think Jason Licht could have foreseen the injury troubles, the suspensions, and things along those lines. At the time, it was a good re-signing. Keith Tandy was brought back on a 2-year, $1.85 million deal. B, very, very good special teamer. Actually, the OG, good special teamer for the Bucs, where we saw a few years of trends where the Bucs did have very solid special teamers for the next few seasons. Actually, 2 of which were brought in this offseason besides Keith Tandy. Chris Conte, a 1-year, $3 million deal. It's a B. Look, I know that people really didn't love Chris Conte and what he brought to the team, but he was still solid, played a lot of games for the Bucs, and I do give him credit for that. New players were brought in, as you guys can see. Offensive guard J.R. Sweezy was brought in on a deal. I'm going to give it a C+. I think Sweezy was good whenever he was out there, but he really struggled to stay healthy. Actually, very similar to an Evan Dietrich Smith at the center position. J.R. Sweezy just struggled to stay healthy. When he was out there, he was fine, solid. In fact, I may bump this down to a C now that I'm kind of saying it out loud in the universe. Sweezy being fully healthy was a big what if. He had just come off of a pretty good stint with the Seattle Seahawks. He signed a 5-year, $32.5 million deal with the Bucs at this time, so big money during that offseason. But again, just didn't really live up to expectations. Robert Ayers was brought in at a 3-year, $19.5 million deal. Again, I give it a C+. He was certainly better than Michael Johnson. I want to say that. And he did have some decent moments, throughout his seasons with the Bucs. I believe he played 2, maybe 3 full seasons with the Bucs, so he did play most of his contract. He actually is back as a coach on the Buccaneers staff currently, by the way, so shout out Robert Ayers for that. You then had cornerback Brent Grimes, who got brought in on a 2-year, $13.5 million deal. It's an A. I think people forget how good Brent Grimes was during this time. He was actually one of my more favorite players during these few seasons he had with the Bucs. He was just a really solid cornerback. He was stable. He was consistent. He was just overall really good. So I thought that was an A signing from Jason Light. Brent Grimes was a true number 1 cornerback. Again, he's one of those moves where it's like, okay, he is starting to build a core group of guys here. You had defensive back Josh Robinson coming in. This is kind of what I was talking about whenever I mentioned some solid special teams guys. Josh Robinson, 1-year, $2 million deal. It's a B. I liked Josh Robinson. He had some really good moments as a special teams guy. They should have kept him longer than they did, but it is what it is. He was a very, very good special teams guy, and I'm always down for that. He had some memorable punt coverage plays for the Bucs. Linebacker Darryl Smith was brought in on a 1-year, $2.5 million deal. It's a C+. Kind of reminds me of like a Josh McCown signing where it's like, hey, you're here to be like a stopgap type option, a band-aid type of option, and it's exactly what he was. He was fine. He wasn't exactly terrible under any circumstances. He was just a solid veteran at that point in his career, and he filled his role. So it's a C+ for me. You didn't pay him a ton of money. Brian Anger was brought in at punter for a 1-year, $1.75 million deal. I give it like a C+. Honestly, now that I'm speaking about it, I'll give it a B- just because Anger was a solid punter. They should have, again, kept him longer than they did, but they didn't. He did stick around for a little bit with the Buccaneers, so, it was a fine signing, all things considered. And then also, later on, this wasn't like fully in the offseason, but they would bring in running back Jaquiz Rogers. I give it a C+. I remember that he was actually just a solid rotational back throughout this time for the Buccaneers, so shout out Jaquiz Rogers. I think he actually led the Bucs in rushing yards this 2016 season, which is just crazy to me. So good job, Jaquiz Rogers. But then we get to the draft, and I think everybody would agree, probably everybody would agree, this is the worst draft of the Jason Light era. I mean, certainly the worst draft we've done so far to this point, right? I mean, this was a bad draft, folks. In round 1, pick number 11, you took Vernon Hargreaves III out of Florida. I give it a C-. He was just way too inconsistent. He did have some fine moments, but it just seemed like he never clicked for the Bucs. And if you remember, whenever Bruce Arians came along as the head coach, he was very quickly shipped out of Tampa Bay. His career was pretty much over at that point. So, VH3, I wanted him to succeed because him and Brent Grimes would have been like a really good combination, and they really tried to make it work. Undercutter just never worked out, and he was very quickly shipped away for a near top 10 pick in a draft. Yeah, wasn't great. He did play a lot of games, so, credit to that, but he was just way too inconsistent. Noah Spence, round 2, pick number 39. I'm going to give it a D+. Honestly, I probably could give this one like a C- as well. He had a very decent rookie season. I think he had 6 sacks in his rookie season. But then after that, for whatever reason, he just completely fell out of favor with this Buccaneers coaching staff. And again, he was another guy where once Bruce Arians came along and stuff like that, he was shipped out very, very quickly. So yeah, Noah Spence was I'll say C-, very similar to Hargreaves, where when you're drafting a guy 39th overall, you want him to have more and do more than what we saw from Noah Spence. Round 2, pick number 39, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers took Roberto Aguayo, kicker. It's an F-. This is one of the worst draft picks in modern NFL history. It's a blessing that people forget about it, but this is one of the worst draft picks in modern NFL history. It's up there, man. It's probably at least in the top 10, okay? It is what it is. It's just terrible. It was a terrible, terrible, terrible decision. Okay, regardless of who was responsible, regardless of what the thought process was in the decision, I get it. Roberto Aguayo was the best kicker in college football history at that time, and then just folded miserably after he was drafted by the Bucs. I mean, we could probably have a whole conversation in video discussing Roberto Aguayo and his failure in Tampa Bay. Laughably bad, F- for failure is Roberto Aguayo. Round 4, pick number 108, you have Ryan Smith coming in, cornerback. I give it a C+. I talked about some solid special teams guys that were brought in, and Ryan Smith played a very versatile role. He was kind of one of those first guys for the Bucs who was playing some safety, some nickel corner, some special teams, and was just kind of an all-around good gadget type of player. So I give them props for that. Ryan Smith did stick around for a good long while with the Bucs. You know, he had a good career for a 4th round pick. It's a C+. Round 5, pick number 148, offensive guard Caleb Benenoch. Dude, this draft sucked. This draft was so bad. It's a D+ for me. Look, Benenoch did start games for the Bucs, and I do give him credit for that, but holy crap, he was pretty bad whenever he was out there on the football field. And the reason I give it a D+ is because, dude, he's a 5th round pick. I understand he doesn't need to go out there and set the world on fire, but he very much looked near unplayable a lot of times. Like, he shouldn't be on any NFL roster. In fact, whenever he was done with the Bucs, he pretty much was done in the NFL. So it's a D+ for me. Round 6, pick number 183, linebacker Devontae Bond. I give it a C-. Again, you know, it is what it is with Devontae Bond for a 6th round guy. He was a player who was around for a few years, would go on to join another team or two afterwards, so I give him credit for that. It's a C- just because, like, hey, it's a flyer, and he was what he was. Round 6, pick number 197, you had fullback Danny Vitale. It's a D. Again, you know, Jason Light had such a weird affiliation with taking fullbacks in the later rounds in his early drafts, right? Joey Iosefa was in there, and you had Danny Vitale in there as well. And none of them worked out, man. Just none of them worked out. They didn't even have a role on these organizations, on these teams, really notable roles at that. It just, they feel like wasted picks, right? You know, no offense to Danny Vitale, but just wrong era, probably. So I give it a D. But we do have one silver lining, guys. One silver lining in this entire crappy draft class, besides, you know, let's say Ryan Smith, and a little bit of Devontae Bond. Peyton Barber was brought in as an undrafted free agent after this 2016 NFL draft. It's a B+ for me. He would eventually go on to be a pretty solid back for the Buccaneers for a good few years, and some very fond memories with Peyton Barber. I was a fan of his, and, you know, just overall, was happy to see him go out there and do some decent work while he was in Tampa Bay. So, man, that's it. Again, not a phenomenal offseason for Jason Light. Again, there were some pieces there where you thought, okay, he's kind of doing some interesting stuff here. But that 2016 draft was atrocious, dude. It was so freaking bad. Roberto Aguayo, again, one of the worst picks in modern NFL history. That is without a shadow of a doubt. But what did you guys think about this 2016 offseason? What do you think about the grades that I gave? Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments section below. I'd love to hear it. Hey, thank you guys so much for watching this video. Hope y'all enjoyed. And as always, guys, I'll see you all in the next video or the next live stream. But until then, and as always, guys, goodbye for now, and go Bucs.